So it's Friday night developer stream recap once again for Marvel's Avengers. So as always, the format in this video, we check out a recap from Billy B311 on Reddit first, and during that recap I'll give my general thoughts as well, and then from there I've got the rest of the stream that I've actually condensed. It was an hour long stream, I've got it down to about 15-20 minutes or so, and it's just all that interesting information that I've kept in it. So let's dive in. We'll start off with the recap from Billy first. As always, I will just quickly say if this is actually helpful, this section, then make sure to jump onto Reddit and actually give Billy an upvote on his thread there. He does these every week or every time we get a stream. So let's run through this. The new takedowns are getting worked on for a fix. That's the new Tachyon takedowns. In the preview look amazing, but they're all broken, which is really bad that actually happened for all of them to go live. It's really pretty embarrassing, but they do look awesome, but it's really embarrassing that has happened. Next up, they went with the term raid over OLT because it's more expansive, all different, and a completely new custom level with new enemies. That's the claw raid that's coming. This is what they told us in the behind closed doors meeting. We had them the rationale as to why it was called a raid and not just an OLT. It says the new enemies will be introduced in the raid but won't necessarily stay in that level only. The enemies are called echo enemies, and I believe that claw can potentially create them. The raid and the gear power level increase has been released at the same time, so that's great. It really makes sense they're doing that. The higher level gear you've earned will be able to be moved forward to the new 175 cap. I'm honestly kind of torn on this, and it's pretty contentious because of course people want to bring forward the gear they farmed over the last year, but there's a lot of perks in that gear that's completely broken balance wise. I'll never shut up complaining about the damage buff and how broken it is, and this would have been an opportunity to rip the band-aid off in one and actually get rid of some of these broken perks, but it looks like we'll be able to bring them forward as well. Let me know what you think about this, because as mentioned, I'm aware it's a very contentious subject, this one. Next up, there will be new gear with new perks with the content. I would bloody well hope so. There will be a mini boss at the beginning of the raid. I think they said that's potentially going to be the echoes or some kind of gameplay involving them. There are multiple facets to improving gear they are discussing, which includes stuff like perk rerolling as they move into next year. This is something we need more than anything, to be honest. They've been focusing on the raid and SpiderMan rather than cloning labs and patrol. They want the raid to be great, so that's what they're working on right now. It really does sound like the team is so small at the moment they can only work on one thing at a time and everything else just gets completely put to the side, which is a little bit worrying there. Next up, they are making resources much clearer with the update. Fragments will be the main currency moving forward, and the resources that don't have a clear purpose will be turned off and brought back with a new purpose. What we've been told as well, some of the older currencies they'll actually retire, they'll look to convert them into fragments, and if you're at the fragment cap, they're potentially looking to increase that. Moving on, your currency of resources will transfer into fragments when the change happens, and they're looking to make sure you get converted resources if you're at a cap, what I just said a second ago actually. And then for earnable cosmetics, they'll be doing stuff like bringing patterns back and having them have a clearer way of being earned. That sounds like the cosmetic rework, but they've kind of renamed it earnable cosmetics instead, which is what we kind of had before, to be honest, so who knows what's happening with that. Next up, they want to make stuff more mechanically challenging rather than just increasing health and damage done by enemies, so that's good. They'll still be bringing content with new heroes and villains in 2022. They say that is the plan. Personally, what I feel is that that's definitely their plan, but whether or not they get to carry out that plan is something completely different altogether. I think the game is in a really precarious position at the moment. I really do. Possibly I'm the most worried I've ever been about the game, to be honest, but probably leave that for another video to get into. Next up, there'll be matchmaking with the raid, so that's good. The raid is 4 players. They were talking about how they would like to increase it, but it's not possible at the moment, and this is something I think that may be delaying the patrol mode. Patrol mode has to be more than 4 players. It has to be between 6 to 8, and it has to be drop in and drop out, and it looks like they simply can't do that at the moment, so maybe that's why it's been put to the side. Loadouts are still being worked on. They prioritise the end game over patrol. Patrol can be a form of endgame, to be honest, so it didn't really sit right with me when they did say this. Echoes are sound constructs made by Claw, and they have a role to play during an encounter during the raid. We've already touched on that to an extent. They are evaluating the champion system, but it's still about prioritisation. I think they know it's pretty busted, but they just don't have time to go back and fix it. They don't tell hard dates because they have to talk to many different groups of people and it's easy to miss dates, so they have internal dates but they don't commit publicly. Once again, I'm pretty certain they have a lot planned for the game, but I'm not sure if they're going to actually get the opportunity to carry out the plans. I know when Marvel Heroes shut down, they had a ton of stuff planned, but they just weren't given the chance to actually do it because of the performance of the game, and who knows what's going to happen in regards to this game with that. Finishing up anyway, with the currency rework, there will be a very clear understanding of what you need to do in game to earn the specific currency you are looking for, so that is a nice quality of life change there. So that is everything from the recap. Once again, feel free to drop by the thread and leave an upvote there, but what I'll do for the rest of the video now, I've got the stream condensed, so enjoy this. If the video has been helpful, take time to like, share and subscribe button, and I'll see you all again soon.
Right, so you see things like our priority mission rush, right? So that's a good example where typically, the exotic gear that you get from a priority mission is typically only once a week, right? So when this event is active, you're able to earn those rewards on a daily basis, right? So really great opportunity to chase that stuff down. For the cargo runner community activity, his spawn rate is significantly increased to a 50% chance while this is active, right? So lots of great opportunities to get the rewards from the cargo runner, and he has some pretty awesome stuff that drops from players of all levels. And then, of course, our flashback reward cache. So this is where completing flashback mission, again, when this is active, will give players a whole bunch more additional resources than they would normally get, right? So really trying to get give players the opportunity to explore other types of the content, other versions of the missions, and hopefully play with other players as well. So that's pretty great.
So I talked about this with some of you previously, but the big reason why we decided to call this a raid is because that content is really different in the OLTs. I talked about this in another stream, right? Like I was saying, hey, the family reunion OLT, like cool boss, but the level isn't as unique as it could have been, and that really just doesn't hit the same notes like with Claw, right? So we wanted to do something more elaborate, something that's more expansive, that has a bigger scope. So really, when we look at the Claw raid, we're calling it a raid because it's different. It's a completely new level. Everything is custom. There's some new enemies in there. There's a mini boss at the beginning. So there's some really cool things that we're doing for it. But OLTs are still cool. So we're going to have OLTs still. It's just that this is a different type of content. So moving forward, we're going to call these things raids. And you'll see when we actually show you the gameplay a little bit. The other thing that's really cool is we're adding new enemies, right? So I know I talked about echoes a little bit in the past, but we have enemies that Claw literally created. So we made these specifically for the raid. So that's another thing that makes the raid interesting, is it gives you a chance to fight some enemies that were made specifically for that. And somebody had asked me recently, like, hey, does that mean like that's the only place we'll ever see those enemies? No, not necessarily. I mean, once we have them made, we can use them elsewhere, right? But the idea is to introduce them in a cool, unique context so that content has a lot of novelty when you play it. And that's certainly part of our philosophy moving forward, right? We want to make sure that when we do content, it has a clear identity, like it's got an interesting personality, and what you're doing in there feels different than what you're playing elsewhere, right?
Players, we're raising the level cap, so players will go from power level 150 to power level 175. So this is a first for the game. It's a huge step forward, and it's really going to give players a challenge to work towards some of this content. And from a high level, part of what we needed to do there too, we wanted to make sure that all of the gear, right, the exotics that players have been working towards, with the mega hives, right, more recently with family reunion, right, and so forth and so on, and even priority missions, right. We wanted to make sure that exotic gear and other higher level gear can be moved forward, right, with the power level cap. Because the way this system currently works, is we're all familiar with, is that you get a piece of gear and then you can only raise it up 10 power levels, right? But we're raising the power level cap to 175. So the way the new system is going to work, when this drops at the same time as the rate of the content itself and the power level cap. So when this is out there, you'll be able to, it will require resources as right now, upgrade modules, and then also more of a fragment cost and such, the higher and higher power level that you go. But in order to upgrade your gear that is lower power level, you need to feed it or consume gear that is the higher power level. So for an example right now, Phil has an awesome Mega Hive set, right? He's fully maxed it out. It's power level 140 once you raise it up 10 power levels, right? But now he's collecting gear from the new content, because the new content, of course, has new gear as well, new exotics, new exciting things for players to chase. Not going into the details about that today, but there is going to be new stuff. And so now you have a choice as a player, you know, I'm both collecting the gear of the new power level, but I also can use gear that I'm getting from this content to then go take my Mega Hive gear and say, let's say I get a power level 155 piece of gear from the content. I can then use that with the upgrade modules and fragment resources to upgrade, you know, my Mega Hive gear up to those levels, so forth and so on. So that's really important that we wanted to clarify for everybody that those are tied together. This was very intentional. We're making sure that as you, as a community, you're progressing in your power levels and your gear, that you're also able to take the awesome gear that you've already collected with you. Now, again, there will be some restrictions to that. We haven't necessarily locked in the exact details, but the gear will need to be a minimum power level in order to upgrade it, and also a certain rarity as well, and such. So it's not just all gear in the game, but it is definitely the gear that you're going to be interested as a player if you've reached that. In terms of perk re-rolling and other things like that, you can see that we're very committed to not only advancing the game, adding more gear, adding more things for players to collect and go after exciting stuff. But a big part of it too is making sure we're improving our foundation, right? Making sure we're improving our existing systems. And that's where you see like our gear upgrading system and the resource rework that's going along with that as well. So there are a lot of other ideas, you know, perk re-rolls and things like that the team have been discussing. The community has provided a lot of great things for us to think about, really good feedback. We're not ready to talk about that today, but we absolutely, as a team, are looking into how do we improve our systems going forward.
Let me get ahead of like the classic questions. So I know a lot of you are asking about cloning labs and patrols. So we've been focusing a lot on the claw raid for this side of the year, and really that's what the team needed to focus on. We really want the claw raid to be awesome, and we really need to spend our efforts on it. So that's what we're focusing on right now. I will absolutely give you guys updates on cloning labs and patrol when we have some, but currently the team is focused really hard on getting the power increase, the gear rework, the claw raid, and SpiderMan to be done. That's the most important things right now. So that's what everybody's working on. So not to avoid the cloning labs and patrol questions. Obviously, you know, we've been talking about cloning labs for a very, very long time. So I know how that feels. I get it. We'll give you guys an update as soon as we have one.
But high level, one of our goals going forward again is to making sure the players have more clarity and agency in terms of their progression journey for their heroes. And a big part of that is the resources. We want to make sure that resources have very clear purpose and identity, and that the players know where they're getting them from. And a good example of that right now is, you know, players can get polycoron in the game, right? And that, for the most part, comes from your daily ritual content with the factions. And polycoron is used for upgrading major artifacts. Everybody knows that. It's really clear. It's really it's a good flow. It's a good path. Other things like upgrading gear right now, it actually requires multiple different types of resources depending on where you are in the system and the type of gear that you're trying to upgrade. So going forward, we're going to be making it so you just need upgrade modules is the primary resource, plus the gear you need to consume in order to upgrade the gear, right, for that system. Now, we will be having fragments as a scaling cost on upgrading gear, and that will be used for other things as well going forward. Fragments are very important for players. That being said, we're going to the other resources that if they don't have a very distinct purpose right now, we're going to be turning some of those off, putting them temporarily, putting them on the shelf, if you will, and then we're going to be bringing them back once they have a very clear purpose and use with the system, and we make it very clear where players can earn those currencies. You're still going to have the things you would expect. You know, units have a very clear purpose, right, for the cosmetic vendor, right? DNA keys have a very clear purpose, right, for the chest, right? So those are all going to still remain there, but we wanted to streamline some of the resources for some of these other systems to make sure they have clear purpose and identity. And for users players who already have a bunch of those resources will have a conversion system that will go once that goes live. So you won't lose out. All of those resources will get converted to fragments so that the players will not lose anything. They will just get their currencies converted over to something that is useful.
Mike, a lot of people are asking if we have any plans to increase the resource cap, because a lot of people are capped out on their resources.
Yeah, we have been looking into that. So again, I'm not ready to do a deep dive today, but hopefully we'll be doing a deep dive soon on this where we can get into those more details. But we are definitely aware that players are at the cap, and we are looking at solutions to make sure you do not miss out on, hey, I was at the cap and therefore my resources were lost. We're making sure that's not going to be what happens. So, like I said, we'll go into more of those details soon, but the team is very aware and is working towards solutions for that.
I see a lot of people that are kind of confused about the SpiderMan event thing. So SpiderMan is going to be here to stay once he's released. Just because there's an event that goes along with it doesn't mean it's a temporary character or anything like that. So no concerns there. Once SpiderMan is out, he is staying.
Yeah, happy to. So I know this is something that players and us as a team as well care a lot about. And so why you're seeing here it's being labeled as earnable cosmetics is because there's multiple facets to this. It's not just one thing. We're actually looking at multiple opportunities and ways that players can earn cosmetics in the game going forward, not necessarily just the ways they were earning them before. So that's why you see that name change. We're not ready to do a deep dive today, but one example, of course, is bringing back patterns. But we want patterns. We're looking at where can patterns be earned from, making it clearer for players how they can get more patterns if that's something that they're pursuing or interested in or chasing, adding more clarity to that system. So that's one example, but there are also other areas where we're looking for allowing players to earn cosmetics as well. That's why the change in terminology there. So hopefully we'll be doing a bigger dive on that soon as well, certainly before those changes go live, and then we'll be able to talk more about that. So it's more than one thing.
We're even looking at having an elite version of the raid where the difficulty is considerably higher, where the requirements on your character and your gear are much higher. And that's part of making the difficulty more challenging without just increasing power levels. So, and I mean power levels for the enemies. I know you guys have been asking for that for a long time. The thing with just increasing power levels on enemies is that it doesn't really do the difficulty that everybody would be happy with. So moving forward, we're looking more into ways where it's mechanics that make the game more challenging rather than just a pure power increase. Doesn't mean we're not going to do power increases, because we absolutely are, because that's part of it. But really, when you guys say, hey, I want a bigger challenge, we're looking into something that's more mechanically challenging. And I think that's more fun, at least in the way that we've been playing internally. I think that gives us much stronger results. So, yeah, I mean, we've got plans for more villains, more heroes. And, as soon as we can get everything ratified and approved, we'll be happy to communicate about it. But yeah, we have plans for next year. This is not the last of the content that we're making. I know some people were worried, like, hey, there's only so many things. Yeah, that's the things we're ready to talk about, but there will be other things.
Well, that is a loaded question right there. I can tell you this. We're definitely not doing any big announcements today. That being said, you see how we are taking, we're not just looking at adding and expanding our systems, but we're also, as you see in the existing roadmap, looking at reworking and improving existing systems. So we are definitely looking at other opportunities on how we could improve other systems beyond, we have gear upgrading as one of them out of the gate here, resources. Comics has definitely been an important topic for us. I've gotten a lot of feedback on that. Definitely a lot of great ideas. So nothing to talk about today, but it is something that's very important to us.
We focused a lot on the claw raids. So patrol and cloning labs are things that we're gonna have to talk about later, just because we focused all of our team's efforts on the raid. We just made the decision that it was much more important to get endgame going in a real meaningful way. And as much as cloning labs and patrol have a great role that they can play in the ecosystem of all the content that we have, I just feel like the end game was more important at this point. So it's just a question of priorities. It's not because we don't like the other content. It's not because we don't want to do it. It's just, when you have to make a choice, and it's a tough choice, right? Because I mean, all the content that we work on, I love. Like, I mean, it's not like we're just going along, going like, oh, well, let's just get rid of all these things that people are expecting. Like, that's not how we look at it. We just look at development, going, look, if we have so much time, what do we want to spend our time on? And to me, it's endgame. I think it's the right time for the Claw raid. I mean, it's the conclusion to what's happening in Wakanda. It all makes sense to focus on that right now. I think when you guys play it, you'll think it was worth it for us to focus on this. But again, right, like we will talk about things like cloning labs and patrol as soon as we can talk about it with more precision. Otherwise, I just sit here going like, yeah, we'll talk about it soon, but it's not how much you're like that. I don't like it either.
No, it's
the champion system, we've been definitely collecting feedback from players on that. And in some ways, the champion system is working well. In other ways, that we definitely are there areas that could be improved. Right? Some things I think landed more effectively than others. So, yeah, we are definitely observing that, collecting feedback, and as always, looking for opportunities in terms of, again, prioritizing all the other features and content we're working on, what might be a good time or opportunity. And then again, ultimately we have to make priority decisions, right? Because it's just the team is only so large, you can only work on so many things in parallel.
We'd love to do join in progress. Not something we've announced at this point, but we would love to do it. We know how much it would help, especially for longer content, especially for things like, I know we've already talked about how that would strongly benefit something like patrol mode. So totally get it. A lot of people are asking about the direction for gear and why we're doing some of the changes we're doing. One of the directions that we have for gear is that we feel like in the past it's been a little bit too random the way that you get gear. Random in the sense of, are you even going to get it? Where do you get it? Is it going to be beneficial for your character? So part of the changes that we're doing, and this is, some of what we talked about is only some of the changes. We want to make sure that you get more reliability and more satisfaction out of farming for gear, right? So when you're doing a cool piece of content, you should have a good idea of what you're shooting for, and you should get something that's more satisfying. And we're going to have a lot of changes to do to get everything done, but that's the direction that we have. I don't know if you want to add to that, Mike, but that's something
It's a good summary, yeah. And you can see some